Now, the technology that runs most of England's so-called smart motorways experienced 22 system outages last year. A special investigation by Good Morning Britain can now reveal. Let's take a closer look.
There are currently 256 miles of smart motorways in use throughout England, and our investigation looked at a particular traffic management system which is in place in just over half of the network.
And that system shut down unexpectedly 22 times, with the average outage lasting 20 minutes. But in one case, there was an outage of over 5 hours. National Highways are planning on introducing this particular system throughout the whole of England by the beginning of next year. But they maintain that safety remains their highest priority.
Well, speaking to us now, campaigner Claire Mercer, who lost her husband in an accident on a smart motorway back in 2019. Your lovely husband, Jason, and she has information about smart motorways and the concerns of those working in the control room. And also joining us, Anna Borges, who suffered life-changing injuries when a lorry crashed into her car. Welcome to you both. Anna, tell us what happened to you. Thank goodness you've recovered, but not completely.
No, it's a long journey. Good morning, and thank you for having me. So yes, the recovery is still a long journey ahead. That day, it's been almost a year. I was driving on the M1. I was going to work. I had a flat tire, so I moved to the left lane. I was looking for the hard shoulder. When I reached the left lane, I realized that there was no hard shoulder. It was a live lane. I was driving around 10-15 miles per hour, and I put the hazard lights on. So I was just, the only thing I need to do at that moment was to reach the next emergency bay. It was like 400 yards away, but I never got there because I was hit by a lorry.
Did you see the lorry?
And since that day, I'm still... Sorry?
Did you see the lorry approaching you through your rearview mirror?
No, thank God I didn't.
No, it just happened.
I saw a few cars. I saw a few cars behind me. I think 3 cars... They moved to the right lane, so I remember thinking to myself, well, they can't see me. And I remember seeing a lorry far away from me, and I thought that having the lorry behind me at some quite considerable distance, that he was covering my back somehow. But apparently he wasn't, and he just hit me. No, I didn't see.
How long had you been driving on that inside lane, do you think, before you were struck?
2 minutes, 2-3 minutes.
Jeez. So it was only 2 minutes before you were hit?
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
What injuries did you suffer?
Yeah. So I broke the chest bone, 5 ribs, and I broke my spine. I had several fractures on the spine. 2 of them burst, so the spine was not stable. So I had to do a spinal surgery to fixate the spine.
Oh, Anna. And it's an obvious answer, but let me just ask the question. If you had been on a motorway with a hard shoulder, what would have happened?
I would stop the car in the hard shoulder, call for assistance. The tire will be changed for sure, and I will go back to work.
And you would not have been hit by a lorry from behind when you were on a smart motorway in a dynamic live lane. Well, Claire Mercer, you know all about this in a tragic way because your husband Jason was killed back in 2019, and you have been a committed campaigner in the years since. What do you make of the figures this morning from our FOI request that there were more than 20 outages last year in the technology which warns drivers that there is a breakdown in the live lane?
Well, it's just terrifying to see it spelled out like that. I mean, I think, to be honest, I think the situation has actually got a lot worse since that data was released, because, of course, they'll only release the data that specifically that you ask for. But the situation is actually a lot worse. But these outages spelt out and released to the media when they ask these questions, if that's what they'll release, what is actually going on? Because that's actually just terrifying enough. And you know, how many times is this happening when incidents like Anna's are happening? You know, was the equipment working when she was nearly killed? Half of the equipment wasn't even installed when my husband was killed, and the other half wasn't working. So it just needs stopping now, and it would be so quick and simple. All they need to do is flick the switch and turn the first lane off, and we've got our hard shoulder back.
Just taking you back to that awful day in June, in the summer of 2019, how did you get the news that your husband had been killed?
Well, I actually phoned the police because the crash paralysed the whole of the area. It was near Meadowhall in Sheffield, and it just gridlocked the absolute entire area. I'm 8 miles away, and I was aware that people weren't getting to work around here. And my husband wasn't responding to messages or contacting me or answering, just even answering his phone, which was very, very unusual, because I first contacted him saying, just be careful, there's a bad accident, you know, you might be late for work, don't rush. And he just never responded. And after 2-3 hours of no responses, I phoned the police, and I said that I thought my husband was involved in the incident. And they asked me what made me think that, and I told them I couldn't get hold of him. And so they asked for his registration plate, and then the line just went quiet. And eventually the operator came back on, and she said, I need to put this through the system and get someone to and come back to you. So I'm going to hang up and we'll ring you back. And I thought that was an incredibly odd response. But I thought that this was a great big crash from like the 80s where, you know, there was 30 odd people involved. And in my brain, I was still imagining that he was, you know, right at the back of this and pacing around, swapping insurance details. I didn't know that only 2 people had been killed and he was one of them. But what I now know is that the police were already on their way to me. They'd eventually managed to identify who was with which vehicle. And they were actually, almost immediately that I got off the phone, I could see 2 high-vis through the front door panel. And I just answered the door and said, is he alive? And they wouldn't answer me. They wanted me to come in and sit down, and I wouldn't let them in until they told me if he was alive.
Oh, my God. When, after that awful, awful afternoon of your life, when did you realise that this was a completely needless death? When did you discover that he'd broken down in the so-called, you know, inside smart lane?
Well, I'd never even heard the term smart motorway. I don't drive, I've never driven, but I'd never heard the term smart motorway. I mean, we went that route almost every day. Normally, I would have been in the car. Any other day, I would have been in the car with him. But I was ill that day and I wasn't going to work. And I didn't know we went across, under and along a smart motorway every day to and from work. And it was only a few days later, my sister walked in the house. Everyone was looking after me. I'd been taken up to my mother's, and my sister walked in the house. She didn't know I was in the room, and she said it was one of them smart motorways. And that was the first time I ever heard the term. And I started Googling it and looking up what they were. And I discovered that some people did know what they were. Not everyone. No one I knew what one was. And if they did, they thought it was to do with fines and driving in closed lanes. They thought it was the cameras for the closed lanes and speed limits. But there was people that knew what they were and objected to them. There had been consultations, and although National Highways was legally obliged to have a consultation, they weren't obliged to listen to the results, because absolutely every single emergency service, expert, industry area told them not to do it, and they still went ahead and did it.
Claire, you, as part of your campaign, have received messages, haven't you, from whistleblowers actually working in control centres, telling you what's going on.
Yeah.
What do they say to you?
They're absolutely desperate. They don't want to be sitting there watching this carnage. Their hands are tied. We've got them doing an incredibly difficult and stressful job, and we're not giving them the tools to do it effectively. The software locks them out. The software sets its own messages. They can't control. There's periods of times where they cannot control what messages are on display, and then yet we get this soundbite from National Highways saying, whenever there's an outage, we have procedures. We have well-rehearsed procedures. There is no well-rehearsed procedures. I get the emails from the control office telling me that they're absolutely desperate. I've had emails saying that there's people in tears while these outages are happening. There is no well-rehearsed procedures.
And just to finish this conversation with the obvious question, we wouldn't be talking to you this morning and you would not be a widow had there been a hard shoulder available to your husband, correct?
Yep, definitely.
It's as simple as that, isn't it? Well, thank you very much for coming on, and more power to your campaign. Obviously, we've spoken to National Highways. They've issued us a statement. They've said this: as with any technology, there are occasional planned and unplanned outages. During these outages, there are well-rehearsed procedures, we just heard about them, to respond quickly to live lane stops.
In April 2023, the government announced that plans for new smart motorways would be cancelled in recognition of the lack of public confidence felt by drivers and cost pressures. That followed a pause in the rollout of new smart motorways previously announced in January 2022. Let us know what you think, and our thanks to Claire and to Anna as well. Anna, good luck with your recovery. The government, of course, says that overall England continues to have some of the safest roads in the world. But the problem is these smart motorways do not appear to be safe if you have broken down. And we know that drivers are changing their behaviour on the smart motorways because they're worried. In the case of David, the HGV driver, he's worried that there might be someone in the inside lane.
He doesn't use the inside lane.
So he doesn't, which feels safer. But of course, he should be driving according to
exactly right.
What is the, what's the right way to drive. If you're affected by those issues, you can find advice and support itv.com/helplines.